Hi, welcome back. This is How to Exhale, our series on love and hate in America. And we're doing this series to help keep the conversation open, particularly on the areas and the issues where our country is the most polarized. And today we have a super extra special guest. Her name is Cheryl Contee, and she is here to talk to us about digital privacy and security. So thanks for coming, Cheryl.
Thanks for having me, Aspen.
Yeah. So we have entered into a political moment where many of the civil and human rights that we have fought for are maybe not as secure as we had hoped. This is true for women and for people of color and queer people and people of Muslim faith, people with disabilities and serious health concerns. And we're all facing the potential of serious loss of rights and protections, loss of our employment, of health coverage, and I feel like the loss of social support in a way because it can feel like some people are celebrating these losses as being good for our country. On the bright side, we're also in this moment where there's more opportunity than ever to be public and to be open and to be connected with our stories and our views and our political positions thanks to the internet, which we are currently on right now, FYI. But all is not always so rosy online. We know that people who have spoken up about ending rape can be targeted and harassed, that political opponents can spread malicious lies and rumors, and then there's just this general revenge-seeking, name-calling, bullying kind of behavior that can happen. Our platforms are corporate-owned. Our utilities are government-controlled, and so it's also possible that the way that we can communicate with each other could be really compromised. So this is a lot, which is why we really needed someone to help us navigate through all of that and talk about it. So Cheryl Contee is the CEO of Fission Strategy, and she's worked with lots of really amazing nonprofits on their digital ecosystems. She's also the co-founder of a company called Attentively, which is the first tech startup with a black female founder on its board to be acquired by a NASDAQ trading company. So all of that to say is that Cheryl is a super big deal, and we're really honored for her to be with us. And she also really loves the internet.
I do. I am a big dork, professionally and personally.
So that's kind of where I wanted to start. What's so great about the internet, right now? What are the great parts about it?
What isn't great about the internet? I mean, you can find food, love, shelter. I mean,
baby formula.
All of these things. I mean, it's brought the world together in ways that weren't possible. One of our clients has been Etsy recently.
Oh.
And Etsy, if you think about, most of their sellers are female.
Yeah.
They're able to, from home, have these thriving businesses that, weren't possible before and can ship things and have relationships, in a marketplace that just, wasn't possible before the internet. So, the internet has brought us many, many beautiful things.
Yeah. And there's some risks right now, which I told Cheryl, if I get that word out, I'm going to be proud of myself. So there's also some risks in being online, and I'm wondering, what your experiences have been. Have you ever been targeted? Or what are some of the fears that, people have right now and the nonprofits that you work with and the people that you work with?
Sure. I mean, from 2006 to 2013, I ran with my co-founder, Baratunde Thurston, Jack and Jill Politics, which was a very popular, black-targeted political blog. And of course, I mean, we, in the past, people would, outspoken black people had a tendency to get shot at, right? That was how people would express, their displeasure with your speaking up. Now, people will, shoot at you with words or attack you. I've been attacked. Our site, was hacked. If I didn't know, senior folks at Google, I probably wouldn't be able to use Gmail. So there are lots of ways in which people can, push back on you if you are outspoken or take a strong stand. Even when you have a big community. I mean, we had a sizable community. We were profiled in big newspapers, and we were still as vulnerable or more so than anyone else.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a risk. In terms of our clients, of course, some of them, are very much vulnerable to hacks. We work with them
Okay.
on, we're not security experts, but we do bring up the topic.
Okay.
And, as we're, we do everything from helping people with strategic engagement planning, campaign planning, organizational capacity building, but also building things, building apps, building sites, doing, high-end data and social integration. And there are security challenges,
Yeah.
in there. So we're very mindful, especially when we're building things, of, how are we building this in a way that is secure, so that if someone launches a DDoS,
So
attack.
Cheryl, what is a DDoS attack?
So it's called, I believe it's direct denial of service,
Okay.
but essentially someone, and it's unfortunately very easy to do. There still isn't necessarily, there are some things you can do, and I won't get into it now on the back end, on the server end, that can help.
Okay.
But to a certain extent, it's still a thing that's easy to do. Basically, someone just sends an overwhelming number of packets into your system and overwhelms your server such that it can't actually process or serve data.
So like the
and that can be
website would
ongoing.
crash.
Right. When a website crashes, that is often a thing
Okay.
that might be happening if someone is intentionally trying
Okay.
to serve you. It's a very brute force
Okay.
primitive tool,
Okay.
but there aren't necessarily, so that's a thing that can happen, but usually those are temporary.
Okay.
It's happened to me where my router has been, sort of technically being burned to the ground, where someone just, and that's more sophisticated, where someone is actually hacking in and breaking into, the way that you access the internet and is trying to get in that.
So those are kind of two different things potentially of someone being targeted individually. So if someone's going after your router, Cheryl Contee,
Right. That's
versus maybe
unusual.
like an organization, that there's kind of different risks, or they're kind of the same.
Unusual for someone to go after your personal router. That's
Okay.
usually more of an organizational
Okay.
type thing. Someone would have to be sophisticated and motivated in order to do that, whereas most of the dummies on the internet are not, right? They're, and I think that is an important thing to keep in mind.
Okay.
The typical thing that people will experience if they are, sharing their story
Yeah.
in some way online that someone might take offense to or want to push back on is, they will use very hurtful, sometimes very violent language and
Yeah.
threats.
Yeah.
I think it is important. Those are traumatizing. That is a form of violence,
Okay.
right? Verbal abuse is a form of violence. 99% of the time, there's no physical danger, right? I mean, when you hear about something like that, it's on the news. The reason it's on the news is because it's actually quite rare that someone will take the time to put on some pants and actually go out into the world and find you and then actually have the courage to hurt you. Most of these people are cowards, in fact. So, I think that is important to keep in mind that, you're not likely to be in any physical danger,
Okay.
but the online harassment is a thing that can be sustained over some time. I've seen it sometimes last, for longer than you might imagine.
Like months or years.
Yeah, months or years
Yeah.
in some cases.
And so there's the technical aspects of, what we should be thinking about to protect our servers or just, understand what could happen to the organization. But then there's also this community aspect. So what is somebody who's been, targeted once and it's, their first time of being really hurt by things that people have said, or when it's sustained over time, sort of what's our responsibility, in the community? How do we help each other?
I think there's a lot of things that you can do and that we can do as a community. The first thing is to get help, right? To let people know, if you're starting to get, particularly some really scary or dark or disturbing comments that are coming in, you should start to document that,
Okay.
and show it, show, I think, a great example would be Leslie Jones
Okay.
from
That's
Saturday Night Live, right? Who actually started, I think she's a classic example of someone who said, look, I don't have to take this, and I'm going to show people, I'm going to show who these people are and shame them online, and they're going to have to explain this, so I think that also pushed Twitter in particular to take action.
Yeah.
Because there was, they could see the public documentation. They couldn't really hide
Right.
to a certain extent. Obviously, not everyone is famous like Leslie Jones, but it's still, the way that she handled it is a perfect example of, document, explain, ask for help, publicly,
In a public way.
right, in a public way, not just in a private way. And those, you can also ask people to push back in terms of the comments. If if you have a community that's around you, right, someone might leave a very nasty comment, and it may take you time to get to delete that or block that person. In the meantime, your community can surround you with love, and push back on that person. And that actually, I've also seen, particularly on Jezebel. I think Jezebel, the community there does a really good job of very quickly isolating trolls and surrounding them with both pushback and also love for the original commenter, and that can be really powerful.
Yeah. No, those are great examples, and I've definitely seen that, especially with a lot of the feminist bloggers that I follow, once they start getting some of those attacks and basically like retweeting them,
Yes.
so that we then like all see it, and then we all have secondary trauma.
The secondary trauma, but it's also an opportunity for people to push back on that person and say, "Hey, you ugly little man, shut up.
Yeah.
Take it somewhere else.
Yeah.
We're not having it."
Yeah. And I've certainly done a lot of jumping in myself, on Facebook or other things. When I see that, and I have found too, when I get sort of like mean little nasty comments, that I go look and I'm like, oh, they have 2 followers.
Right. It's again,
Bummer.
these are people who are often, you don't want to give them more power in your mind and in your heart than they actually have.
Yeah.
They are reaching out from a place of often fear, right, or their own trauma. We don't know what would cause them to behave in such a terrible way. So having some compassion, but also understanding, right, that person is actually speaking from their own place of powerlessness. They have no power over me.
Yeah. And I know you've done a lot of work, particularly with Dreamers and with the immigrant rights communities. And is there anything in particular in this moment that we should all be aware of in terms of how we can help and how we can support and how we can be in community?
Sure. Well, there are some really great resources, I think, that the ACLU has.
Okay.
And they put them on social, so if you're following them on social, whether it's local, like here we have the ACLU of Northern California, but there's also the national ACLU. They have some really great resources of what are the facts to know if you're being arrested or detained. Do you have to, for example, can police force you to turn on your cell phone?
Yeah.
No, except when you're going through customs. Customs is a very different, whole other thing. It can be very difficult. But right, I mean, if you really don't want, for whatever reason, your phone searched, and they, to a certain extent, don't necessarily have the right to do that, turn it off. They can't compel you to turn it on.
Okay.
Make sure you have a backup, though, because they can confiscate it.
Right.
There's another great resource that I recommend.
Thank you.
From Dalit Diva and her crew at equalitylabs.org. Equalitylabs.org has all of these great, very attractive, very female-friendly one-pagers on how to protect, how to secure your iPhone, how to secure your Android, how to secure your network access. And they're all, it's a checklist, free or low-cost things that you can do. So here's a free thing that you can do, right? Two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
What is two-factor
What is
authentication?
two-factor authentication?
Essentially, it is saying, when, for example, you are logging in, it forces you to re-log in maybe every 30 days, and then we'll send a code, either via phone, to your cell phone as a text message, to an app, and you have to put in that code in order to re-log in.
Okay.
And this is really important. I mean, when I turned on two-factor authentication for myself and for our crew at Fission, huge difference in terms of the level of attacks that actually managed to be sustained and even just any kind of static at all. So two-factor is great. I will say in this age of electronic surveillance, sending things via text message is not as safe anymore. So it's actually safer to get that code via phone. It'll just call you, and a robot voice, for example, from Google will say your code is 13 blah blah blah. Or there's a really great app. It's just as easy as text messaging. It's called Authy. Authy, like Authy, like authentication, but cool. I know, I'm a nerd. So Authy is pretty much the same thing. It'll send, like, Slack is more secure than Skype. If you've been using Skype to chat, you may want to switch over to Slack. Slack has two-factor authentication. So it'll send, say, okay, you're trying to log in from this new device that you don't normally use. We need to make sure it's actually you. It'll send that message, that code to Authy. Right. So that's a really useful, I think, tool. Those are some useful tools to
Those are a ton of useful tools.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to throw in there right before we wrap up, of a resource that you wanted to make sure we knew about?
There's actually a lot of information out there. Wired also has been doing a good job of putting out things that explain what to do when you're detained in terms of your digital security, or how to just shore up your devices. Make sure you're using strong passwords. Think about LastPass. LastPass, LASTPASS, is a way in which you have one master password, right, for everything, and then it will actually start to create strong passwords for you, so you don't have to remember all these passwords or keep them. Like, so often people will actually send via clear text over the internet in an email, here is my password. Very, like, anything that's backward searchable. If we learned anything from the DNC hacks, it's that things are backward searchable for a long ways. Okay, so you don't want to have, ideally, that kind of information just loosely out there. LastPass is a very secure way to not only create stronger passwords that have things like capital letters and numbers and symbols, but to also store that so you don't forget it.
Passwords are the bane of my existence,
as
I am sure they are for many people, and the importance of making sure that they're really strong and not easily hacked. So that's a great resource, LastPass.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cheryl, thank you so much for being here. We need to wrap up. We've gone a little bit over, but I was like super into everything that you were saying, and it was so many helpful resources. So we're not going to be here next week. We're taking the week off, but we will be back in March with a lot of great guests. But the last thing I want to do is put out a little plug for this book by Cassie Underwood, which came out yesterday on Valentine's Day. It's called May Cause Love. And it's about her journey to enlightenment after abortion. And we're big fans of Cassie, and I hope that you will buy it and share it and give it to your friends, because there's a lot of incredible stories in here. So again, Cheryl, super honored to have you here. Thank you so much.
You're my hero.
You're
as are everyone who tuned in. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you.